Sup, guys? It's Toad, right back with you as always. January 31st as we close out the month here with the slump continuing. Two straight losses, two losing days. Yesterday went from 2-1 to 2-1 to 2-3 by the end of it. Not fun. Started out, got the win on, Florida International against Jacksonville State. I almost said Jacksonville State. Florida International, not really a sweat cover there. Pretty low scoring game. They didn't win outright, but they covered. They hung in there. Montreal Canadiens, just complete stinker on that one. That was terrible. Tampa Bay Lightning got there, and then the bad two in the two late games there, the bad two games. Memphis Grizzlies put themselves in an early hole, and they got out of it, and they won the game, but they didn't cover. They had a nice late comeback, but no cover there for them. And then Oregon, I don't know what to tell you about that. They're looking like they might be able to come back in the game. They're hanging around. They're in there, not that far off from the number there, and then it just completely unraveled. I said it was a square play. There were a lot of pros on the unranked, home favorite there, but I thought it was a good spot to play Oregon, and I did not get that one right at all. So I don't like going up against the professionals and also not being right about it. A lot of times when I go up against those guys, I do actually have a decent read on the situation, but not in that case. So that did not work out. Let's go to today. We got Friday action. I have 3 plays. I have 1 in each sport, and I have 2 road flipped favorites, and I have 1 kind of misleading favorite. So let's get right into it, man. College basketball, it feels like a college basketball Friday here now. So we're getting Ivy League action going on here, MAC action, and we got my play is going to be in the Atlantic 10, and then we do have MAC action as well, MACtion, and there is one big game in the Big 10, which I will talk about as well. The first game up at 5 p.m. Eastern is the best Ivy League game. Yale and Princeton. I mean, these are the top 2 teams in the Ivy League. Yale is laying 2.5 on the road here, so the odds makers are telling you Yale is the better team. They're down from 3.5 to 2.5, though, so some money has come in against them, and I don't really necessarily disagree with that. I think both teams are going to show up, and Princeton, you're getting them at home in this game. I think they may be able to pull this one off. Yale likes to play mid-tempo, but Ken Pom does have Yale very unlucky so far this year, and they are a pretty good offensive team, good offensive efficiency there. They are certainly the better team. Yale in the top 100 in Ken Pom's rankings. Princeton way down at 136, and he has Princeton 12th in luck index. So he actually has Yale as the way more unlucky team right now. So he's telling you that Yale is actually better than they look. Princeton is actually worse than they look. Both teams better offensively than defensively. But in this game, I don't know, man. Princeton, they do have, they play a slow tempo, slower than what Yale wants to play. So Princeton may be able to slow this game down and stay in this game at home. And that is kind of what you're banking on, getting this many points at home. Although Yale, yes, they are the better team. But in this spot, I don't know. I think Princeton may be able to get the job done. That's kind of the way the line is moving there. I don't really disagree with it, even though, as you see with Ken Pom, he is telling you that Yale is an undervalued commodity right now in general, and Princeton is an overvalued commodity in general right now. We do have one Big East game, Butler and Georgetown. Not the greatest Big East game here, although both of these teams, they're competitive against one another because they're both not that good. Butler is coming off a game where they kind of were in this game for a while against Marquette. This is a big game for them. Butler was winning for the entire first half. They were up almost double digits in the first half. Blew the lead in the second half, kind of hung around in this game. They were still within a couple possessions with 5 minutes left in the game and then fell short. So that was a big performance from Butler. Marquette coming into their place. Butler wound up actually failing to cover as 8.5 point. I was going to say they covered. No, they lost by 9 as 8.5 point favorites. So they didn't cover the closing line, but excuse me, they played a pretty difficult game. There was Georgetown really kind of got embarrassed, only putting up 41 points against St. John's. Pretty embarrassing when you only put up that many points, that few points there. So Georgetown staying at home, not having to travel here. Butler having to go out to Georgetown, having to travel to Washington, D.C. and maybe getting afraid of having to fly in the DC area. There might be helicopters coming in there and coming at their planes. Who knows? Is that too soon? I don't know. It's a crazy situation, man. That plane crash, terrible situation. I still think there's something going on there that they're not telling you, but I don't want to get into conspiracies on Better Off Dead here. But Georgetown, I think, is in the spot where they're going to be a little bit more angry and trying to bounce back from this. They are actually favored. So the odds makers are telling you these teams are pretty close in power ratings. Georgetown down from 4 to 3.5 with reduced juice, though. So some money looks like it has come in against Georgetown. But I lean to the Georgetown side in that one because their previous game was just a disastrous blowout loss, even though it was to a good St. John's team. Butler had a much more big effort, competitive performance against Marquette, who is the best team in the Big East. So Butler could be a little bit more tired coming into this one, and Georgetown could just be a little bit more angry coming into that one. My actual play is up next as we get to the 7 p.m. games, and that is Dayton -1. I'm going to play Dayton in this 8-10 matchup, even though, yes, this is a big game for both teams. Both teams are a couple of the better teams in the A10, but I think this is a better spot for Dayton. The odds makers are telling you Dayton is the better team, even though they have the worst conference record. They have the better overall record, but their conference record is ugly at 4-4. St. Louis 6-2. St. Louis has played better in A10 play so far. Dayton has faced a more difficult schedule, though, man. I mean, in conference play, a couple of ugly losses early on, but they've won 3 of their last 4 games. Beating Duquesne by a lot on the road and beating St. Joe's. Those are both pretty good wins there. And now they're coming off an ugly 22-point loss to St. Bonaventure. St. Bonaventure is not bad, but man, that is an ugly loss. You lose by 20+ to anybody, you're going to want to bounce back in the next game. Yes, I know it is a second straight road game. They're having to go from upstate New York out to St. Louis, Missouri. So it's not the easiest travel spot, but I think that is, even though this is kind of similar to what we were seeing with Oregon last night, where they were coming off an ugly loss and still having to travel. But in this case, I think it's travel Dayton has done before. St. Louis has been in the A10 for a little bit now, so I think they're not going to be not used to this necessarily. So I think it's fine. I like Dayton in this one. Dayton, they face a pretty difficult schedule, man, as you can see. They actually beat Northwestern early in the season. New Mexico State's not that bad either. Losing by 2 to North Carolina, even though North Carolina's not as good as we thought they were. That's still not a bad loss. 5-point loss to Iowa State's not bad. Crushing UConn is pretty impressive. They beat Marquette as well. Beat UNLV. They're okay. Losing to Cincinnati, I'm not going to really knock them for that either. And then after all that, they really kind of started faltering in conference play after a very difficult out-of-conference schedule. So they played a more difficult out-of-conference schedule than St. Louis did. St. Louis really did not play that many big-name teams, and all the better teams they played out of conference, they lost. They lost to Santa Clara. Wichita is actually not even that good. Quinnipiac and UMass Lowell are good for their conferences, but they're not great. San Francisco is pretty good, and St. Louis lost to them. They lost to Grand Canyon, although they played them to a 1-point game. And then St. Louis in conference, they did play a couple of the weaker teams in the conference. Fordham, Richmond, and LaSalle are all pretty bad, so those are 3 of St. Louis's conference wins. But now you got Dayton coming off that ugly loss. You got St. Louis coming off basically their biggest win of the season, man, against VCU. VCU is the best team in this conference, in my opinion, and I think in the odds makers' opinions, the power ratings guys' opinions. St. Louis was able to knock off VCU as like a 7.5-point home underdog here. Actually, it was down to 5.5, and there were fights going on in the stands. This is a highly emotional game for St. Louis, a huge win for them, and now they have to turn around after that and play again against Dayton. I like Dayton in this one, like I just said, for all these reasons. Ken Baum has Dayton as the better team. They're 38th in offensive efficiency, 82nd in strength of schedule. That's not bad. They do play a slower tempo, though, at 284, and St. Louis is going to probably try to speed them up a little bit. But still, Dayton, way better offensively. The teams are actually similar defensively. St. Louis is only slightly better defensively. And, yeah, Dayton is 137th in locks. They are a little bit lucky. But St. Louis is 176th in luck, so Ken Baum has both teams kind of mid-tier in luck. I guess St. Louis mid-tier tempo-wise as well, but Dayton may even be able to actually successfully slow them down a little bit too, because St. Louis doesn't play that fast, really. Dayton likes to play really, really slow, so St. Louis will try to speed them up to some extent, but still, I don't know they're going to be successful in doing that. Dayton, despite being the slower team, their offensive efficiency is way better than St. Louis's, so they get better offensive possessions is what that means. So they can keep score with St. Louis here, man. They definitely have the ability to outscore them because their offense is efficient enough. St. Louis is only a little bit better defensively, like I said, and that's about it. And St. Louis has faced a slightly less difficult schedule at 110th in the country. So Ken Baum's got St. Louis below 100 in rankings. He's got Dayton up at 74th. I think it's the better spot for Dayton. Dayton's moved from a pick'em to a 1.5-point favorite. There are ones out there right now. The line, like I said, may look a little bit misleading because it's like, wait a minute, St. Louis just beat VCU. They're 6-2 in conference, and you're getting St. Louis getting points at home. It looks very tempting. And with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar there, he's the guy that everybody knows. Dayton plays a way more ugly style of games. The public's going to have a tendency to probably want the Robbie Avila there on St. Louis because he's the more impressive player. But this is a team sport, man. Give me Dayton. I think Dayton has been undervalued since conference play has begun because they started out really bad in conference play. They're definitely better than they look. They played very impressively, in my opinion, in out-of-conference play. So give me Dayton minus the 1 in that one. Scott, what's up, man? Hell yeah, we're all homosexuals here. We love the homies. All right, in the MAC, we have a pretty big game here between Akron and Kent State. This is an interesting one. Both teams are going to show up for this game as well. I mean, these are two of the better teams in the MAC. Akron, probably the best team in the MAC. But you got Kent State as a 1-point favorite, moving up to 1.5 with juice. So the line is moving on Kent State a little bit. It looks a little bit misleading again, I think, where you have Kent State being a favorite, but they have the uglier-looking record. And Akron, undefeated in conference, but Kent State has 4 losses in conference. So it's like, well, something's got to give here, right? And I think it may give in this game. I think Kent State is probably the preferred side in this one. Kent State, I mean, both teams have faced some of the better teams in the conference already, so there's nothing to really see there as far as which team has faced like the more difficult in-conference schedule. I think they're pretty comparable. Kent State out of conference lost to Auburn, UC Irvine, who's actually quite good as well, and Alabama, so they faced some pretty difficult out-of-conference competition. I think more difficult than what Akron faced. Akron lost to St. Mary's. That was, I think, their best. That was the best out-of-conference opponent they had. So, yeah, I think you're getting a Kent State team that's a little bit more battle-tested as well. So I do lean to Kent State in that game. I agree with the line move in that one. And then we got, what else? Yeah, let's talk about the Big Ten game, and then I'll move over to the other sports here. Let's get it done quick, man. We got Indiana at Purdue in this game. Purdue, number 10 in the country. We all know Purdue is the better team here. I've been saying Indiana isn't even as good as what their record would lead you to believe. Purdue is a big favorite here. Down from 12.5 to 12 with juice, though. So a little bit of a move down on Purdue. I don't necessarily disagree with taking the points with Indiana here because Indiana, you know they're going to step up when they face Purdue. Purdue is basically the big boy in the state of Indiana at this point, so it's not the University of Indiana at this point. So Indiana may be playing with a little bit of an extra chip on their shoulder for that reason, but Indiana's coming off that difficult game against Maryland where I played Indiana in that game, and they almost won the game. They covered for me, so they are coming off of that and now having to travel out on the road, although it's not a huge road trip, obviously, just within the state of Indiana. And they are, you know, they're going to show up for Purdue regardless. So even though they are coming off a big game, the question is, are they going to have tired legs? Are they going to run out of steam after that? I don't know that they will. I think Purdue may be in the slightly worse spot here where Purdue may just be feeling a little bit too overconfident right now and feeling pretty plump and gay because they're coming off a game where they just absolutely wrecked Michigan. And Michigan was ranked at the time. Michigan is a good team. Michigan only had 1 loss in conference, and Purdue absolutely wrecked them on this floor here. So Purdue is staying on the same floor where they just annihilated Michigan by almost 30 points, 91-64, just a complete destruction of Michigan. So Purdue may be feeling a little bit too high on themselves coming into this game, man. So I do actually agree with the line moving this one as well and grabbing the points with Indiana. And the other thing about that is Purdue likes to play really, really slow. I know they scored a ton against Michigan, but they usually don't do that. So that actually makes them look like a scoring machine when they're not really. I mean, yes, they do have good offense. They have an efficient offense, but they play slow. They play in the half court. They play games with fewer possessions usually. So that's going to make it a little bit more difficult for them to cover a double-digit number as well because of the style of play they like to play. And Indiana likes to play a little bit faster, but I do think Purdue is going to be able to slow this game down because they are the better team at home, and it's easier to slow it down anyway. So, but again, that's not necessarily conducive to laying a huge number like that. So I do agree with the move in that one too and lean slightly to Indiana in that one. Let's go over to NHL. We only have a few games. None of these games are really that interesting. The best game, I guess, is Vancouver-Dallas. Dallas is down from minus 175 to minus 169 as a home favorite. 80% of tickets, 94% of the cash on Dallas. So the line's moved against them, and it does look like they have some cash coming in on them. I agree they are the better team. Vancouver has strung together a few pretty good games in a row here, but after beating Washington, that was a nice win. They beat two somewhat lesser teams in St. Louis and Nashville, but they did it on the road, and Nashville isn't really that bad a team. Now they're facing a third straight road game, which is not really the easiest thing to do. Even though, yeah, they're going to try to show up and step it up to play a game against Dallas, who's one of the best teams in hockey. And Dallas is coming off their own big win. They just beat Vegas in overtime. And they're returning home from that. They do have an extra day off here, so Dallas has extra rest, but they are having to travel back from the Pacific time zone here off a huge overtime win against Vegas. So maybe Dallas is in the slightly worse spot here as Vancouver's kind of just rolling with momentum right now through that road trip, and Dallas is having to return home, which I say a lot of times is a distracted spot, although I don't know if they're necessarily going to overlook Vancouver, who's been playing pretty well. But I actually agree with the line move and not where the cash percentage is right now. I would slightly lean to Vancouver. I think the spot is a little bit worse for Dallas in that one, even though, yes, Dallas is the better team. And then we got my actual play here is going to be on, well, actually, let me see, because St. Louis, Colorado, this is not the game I have a play on, but there might be some angles to look at here. Let me see. St. Louis, they're on a 3-game losing streak. They lost to Vegas, Dallas, Vancouver. And Vegas, I had Vegas in that game because it was a zigzag spot where St. Louis had beaten Vegas on their own ice the night before that. So Vegas flipped it around and returned the favor with a road win. I had Vegas in that one. St. Louis then lost to Dallas and Vancouver, but now they have 3 days off and they get to start a road trip. So I do think this is a good focus spot for St. Louis, getting to get out of home. When things aren't working at home, one of the best things for you is to just go out on the road, have a couple of days off, forget about your losing, stop that losing momentum. So I actually do like the spot for St. Louis in this game. Colorado is actually returning home from a road trip, so I don't like the spot for them. It was a short road trip, though. It was less than a week, but it did take them to the East Coast, to Boston and New York. Some difficult games in there. The Islanders really kind of embarrassed them in their most recent game, though the Islanders have been hot, but still, that's a game Colorado should not have lost 5-2. Now they're returning home from that, and as I always say, the return home spot is a distracted spot a lot of times. You have to get back to home life. You have stuff to do. And St. Louis, St. Louis is not necessarily the team that is going to draw your focus back in. So I do lean to St. Louis in this game. Colorado's down from minus 208 to minus 178. So some significant money looks like it has come in on the St. Louis side. I agree with that. It's not quite a play for me, but I agree with grabbing St. Louis in some way. If you want to just fire on the money line, I wouldn't really disagree with that. You're getting a decent price on it, and you're not saying they're going to win the game, but you are saying they have a better chance to win the game. You could maybe look at the puck line, which you're probably having to pay a little bit extra for that puck line on St. Louis there. You're probably paying, I don't know what you're going to be paying, but it'll probably be above minus 120 on that. So you might look to split half the bet on the puck line and half on the money line, like I do, something like that. And speaking of split bets, I've got one in this last game here on the Utah side. I know I'm laying a favorite price with a really bad Utah team, but I think the spot is pretty bad for Columbus here, and I think The records at this point may be a little bit misleading, especially on Columbus's side, but I'm going to split this bet half on the Utah puck line, -1.5 goals at +140, and the other half on the money line at -178. So at least if they just win outright, you'll have a slightly winning wager there. You won't win the whole thing, but you'll have a small win if they win by 1 exactly. And of course, if they win by more than that, you scoop the entire bet. And when Columbus is the opponent, I think that helps as far as being able to score more goals, because Columbus is not a very good defensive team. They're not a very good goaltending team, so I don't really trust Columbus, and I definitely don't trust them in this spot. And people are going to look at this and say, holy crap, Columbus has a really good record right now. They went on this nice run here for a while. They were on fire, although they beat mostly bad teams in that run there. They're sitting at 25, 19, and 7 right now. Nice record. So I think the public's going to look at this and want Columbus and look at this and think, well, wait a minute. Utah's sitting at exactly 500, and they're laying a price like this, a huge favorite price. Yeah, well, the odds makers are telling you that Utah is actually still the better team over Columbus. Columbus is not as good as they look right now, and I think they are shading the line a little bit because the situation is so bad, but I'm still going to come in and do it and play the situation. I think the situation is real bad for Columbus here, even though I know they did have some days off before they faced Vegas, so they may not be the completely unrested team here, but they've been traveling all over the place, man. They had a road trip out to the East Coast starting on the 18th, got back home a week later on the 25th. They came home and they did not suffer the letdown or the distracted spot when they came home, and they beat the LA Kings in overtime. Huge win. Then they had a bunch of time off to think about that. They had 4 days off, traveled to Vegas, and what did they do? They went into Vegas and they beat Vegas yesterday, also in overtime. So they're coming off 2 huge overtime wins, which are their most impressive wins in this entire stretch, really, except for maybe the Carolina one here. But they didn't have very many impressive wins otherwise. And now they're coming off all that. They're having to go from Vegas now up into altitude into Utah with no time off. And they got Dallas up next, which is a game that they might pay more attention to because Utah's not a very good team, and they're coming off 2 huge wins against bigger opponents. They've had bigger opponents all around this. They beat Toronto as well, actually pretty impressively on the road, 5-1, and then had a loss to Carolina in there. But again, I don't trust this Columbus team. I don't trust them in this spot at all. I think this is a bad spot. I don't really trust Utah either, but this is a sandwich spot for Columbus. They're on a back-to-back, which is not an easy thing to do, with travel up into elevation. In Utah, they're on a 3-game loss streak, man, but I think they're in a positive bounce-back spot here because they had a road trip starting on the 23rd where they went to Minnesota, Winnipeg, Ottawa. So they went all over the place, really, up into Canada, all across Canada, up to Eastern Canada. Then they came back home, and they had a real ugly loss to the Pittsburgh Penguins, who have really been kind of in disarray and not playing that well. That is an ugly loss with Utah. It was a return home spot, so I'm going to give them a little bit of a pass on that because when you return home from a road trip, as I keep harping on, you tend to be a little bit distracted. You don't play the best game. And when that's the case and you don't play a very good game in that return home spot, you tend to play way better in the second game. You get things settled at home finally. You get those distractions out of the way. You know you played bad in that first game, and that helps you refocus a little bit. And I think that's the spot that we're getting Utah in. So I think we're getting Columbus in an extremely bad scheduling spot, and we're getting Utah in a pretty positive scheduling spot. So I will play Utah in this one, even though the line looks way too big. It looks way too easy to take Columbus as a huge underdog here. The huge underdog with the way better record who's been playing way better recently. I'm going to fade that sentiment entirely, and I'm going to jump in on this train here to fade Utah. Fade Utah's loss streak is what I mean here. Play them to break the loss streak. Give me Utah with that split bet situation there. That's what I'm going to do. Nate, what's up, man? Sabaro, is that actually a last name, or is that just like a made-up Italian-sounding name just for a fake fast food pizza joint just to make them seem like they're Italian? I don't know. Let's go to NBA before we get out of here. Not a whole lot of very interesting games, to be honest here. Denver's laying a ton of points at Philadelphia, which we know Philadelphia's without Joel Embiid and Paul George right now. So they can't get right. They're without their best 2 players here. Denver is trying to finish up a road trip here, and they've lost every game on the road trip so far. So they might be getting a little bit tired, but then again, they're also trying to get a win. I mean, they need a win here on this road trip. This road trip has been bad. They just lost by 10 to the Knicks, where the Knicks came into that game having scored over 140 in 2 straight games. So it didn't look like the greatest spot for the Knicks, but I mentioned on the show, the market read did look like it was on the Knicks. The market read did wind up being right on that one. Denver, I think they could be in a spot where they will show up focused here, but the problem is, even though, yeah, they need a win on this road trip, but they're playing Philadelphia, and the last time they played Philadelphia was only 10 days ago, and they beat them 144 to 109 in Denver. So this Philadelphia team, they may still not totally take seriously because they absolutely wrecked Philadelphia in that game, and that might actually motivate Philadelphia a little bit in this one, although Philadelphia is on a roll right now. So you got Denver having lost every game on the road trip so far, and Philadelphia's won every game on the homestand so far. Philadelphia beat Cleveland somehow, which I think was the last game George played before he got hurt, and then he went down, and they still beat the Bulls, which maybe that's not that impressive, but it was on the road, and I did think that was a bad spot for Philadelphia, but the Bulls are returning home from a road trip there, so it wasn't a great spot for them either. But it was a back-to-back off beating Cleveland, and Philadelphia still won that game. Then a couple days off, and they beat the Lakers. Then, as a home underdog, they beat Sacramento, or I thought that was a good spot for Sacramento. That was another back-to-back for Philly, and they won again. So Philly's been playing well, but I don't know, man. They're playing a third game in 4 days here now. They do have Boston up next, which is a big game. I don't know. I don't know how to read this game, man, because the one thing is that Philadelphia still might be focused because the last time they played Denver was only 10 days ago, and Denver absolutely embarrassed them, and that was the last game Philadelphia lost. So they may still show up focused here. This is a very difficult game to read. I could see arguments for both sides in this game. I will not play it. Denver's up from 8 to 9.5. Is a big-time road favorite, where that line starting to look a bit too high. 69% of the tickets on them and 50% of the cash on the Sixers. So some of the money coming in and buying back on the Sixers. Again, very difficult to read that game. And then you got Toronto favored against Chicago at this point. Toronto's won like 6 games in a row or something. Just insane that Toronto's been starting to win games. Doesn't make any sense. They're up from 2.5 to 4.5. 64% of tickets on them, but 58% of the cash coming in on the Bulls. Toronto, I mean, they've beaten some decent teams in that mix. Orlando, although Orlando's been dealing with injuries, but I think they did have some of their guys back in that game. They beat Atlanta twice on the road. Then they didn't even suffer a letdown return home from that. They beat the Pelicans, who had, I think, most of their guys there for that. And then they beat Washington. But Washington's the worst team in all of the NBA. But Toronto, I don't want to step in front of that Toronto train right now, man. And Bulls are coming off playing the Celtics, although they didn't do well. The Celtics were able to get that win pretty easily there by 22 points. So the Bulls are coming off that, playing a next road game here. I think they did have one day off in between the two, so I don't know what to do with that game either. I just thought it was kind of interesting that Toronto is a favorite like that, which is crazy. I always talk about my Boston teams, so my Boston Celtics are going to New Orleans tonight. They're at the New Orleans Pelicans. This game is hard to read, too. Celtics are starting a road trip, and as I tend to say, that does tend to be a focus spot, although they do have Philadelphia up next. With Philadelphia being so injured, I don't know, man, but the Celtics lost to Philadelphia at home on Christmas, so that is a revenge spot for the Celtics, or they may be looking for that revenge, so they may actually overlook New Orleans. But then again, the Celtics almost lost to New Orleans when they played them on January 12th. The Celtics just played them at home, and the Celtics barely beat New Orleans at home, so this might actually be a spot where, I don't know, man. I don't think the public is going to come in and think that about that, though. I don't think the public is going to look at this and think, oh, New Orleans played the Celtics, so within 1 point in Boston. So, of course, that means New Orleans is a live dog in this game, right? Because it's the Celtics and the Pelicans just have a really, really ugly record, I don't think the public is actually going to even think that way. They do think that way a lot in college basketball, but in this, I don't really think so. But because the Celtics almost lost to New Orleans, it might focus the Celtics a little bit because they know New Orleans almost caught them. And that was a spot where I played the Celtics in that game, I'm pretty sure. They lost so badly to Sacramento in the game before then. I was on Sacramento in that game because that was a return home spot for the Celtics there. So I thought they were in a huge bounce back spot in the next game, and they still almost lost the game. So the Celtics might remember that, and that might give them reason to show up in this game still. New Orleans did just play Dallas and played them tough to within 1 point. And it was 2 days ago, but they're staying at home, so they're not traveling. That was a return home spot for them as well. So they weren't away for very long. They didn't go that far. They did go up to Toronto. They were only away for 5 days. They came home. They did play a big game, good game against Dallas. Only lost by 1. Not a terrible game there. Now they get this game against Boston. And New Orleans, you always got to pay attention to who they actually have playing because they've been dealing with injuries constantly, but it does look like Williamson, McCollum, Murray, Murphy III. I think they're all there. The only guy they're really missing is Brandon Ingram. So you're getting basically a full New Orleans roster in this game. I don't think there's a whole lot going on with the injuries in this game. We can see real quick here. So Ingram's not back yet, but other than that, it looks like Murray is a game-time decision. With it being the Celtics, I kind of expect him to play. Celtics have Al Horford listed as a game-time decision, but I don't know if that is a huge deal. I mean, he's their backup center at this point. He's an old man. So a lot of times they do kind of just rest him. They got Porzingis, and they do have some other big men there in Boston. Boston, very deep team. So I don't know how to read this game. And the market read is against the Celtics, as you got them up from 10 to 11 as a huge road favorite. But, excuse me, 73% of tickets on them, 95% of the cash on New Orleans, though. So it looks like the Celtics are indeed a public road favorite, and the money looks like it is coming in on the side of New Orleans. So I don't know what to do with that game. Let's finish it off with my play, and then I'll get out of here. And that is, I told you it was another road flip favorite. And I'm going to play Phoenix in this spot against Golden State. Phoenix has flipped from a 2-point dog to a 1-point favorite with juice. Warriors look like they have 53% of tickets, 55% of the cash right now. I don't know what's going to happen with those percentages, but it looks like the actual money has driven this number. I don't really know that it's injuries that are driving this number, because if you look at the injury report, and by the way, as far as the injury report last night, Memphis, I didn't realize that Ja Morant was going to be a game-time decision in that one. I don't even know if he wound up playing or not, but Memphis is used to playing without him. They played pretty well without him, so I don't know if it really mattered much. Phoenix has nobody listed on the injury report at this point, and Warriors, it's the typical injury report. Green and Kuminga are both still out. That's been the case for a while, so Warriors are going to have the rest of their complement of players here. The problem with the Warriors, the reason why I'm going to fade the Warriors here is they're coming off a gigantic win over Oklahoma City, man. They were a 10-point underdog in this game 2 days ago. They beat Oklahoma City. I mean, what more can you do? The Warriors have not been a very good team. I mean, they're an aging team. They have not been playing that well, and they just beat the best team in the Western Conference, maybe the best team in basketball, though I still don't want to say that and go against my Boston Celtics, although the Celtics have had some real lapses this year, but huge win for Golden State on their home floor against Oklahoma City. Oklahoma City's starting to maybe get a little bit tired as the season progresses. That was a huge win for Golden State. Now they turn around and they face Phoenix. And last time they faced Phoenix, they beat them at home. So maybe it's a little bit of revenge for Phoenix. That was December 28th. Golden State lost at Phoenix the other time they played them. Both were close games, but the odds makers are telling you Phoenix is the better team at this point. Golden State was actually a 6.5-point favorite in this game. Green played in that game. But still, why would the line move from it being 6.5 in that game to Phoenix being a 1-point favorite here? Well, you maybe knock like 1 point off the line for Draymond Green, but obviously that doesn't account for why this line has moved this much. And I just think the odds makers did not have Golden State correct back then. I mean, we've had a lot more games to look at now, and I think the odds makers, the market is adjusting a little bit. Golden State isn't quite as good as we thought they were, and Phoenix has started playing better against us. They got Kevin Durant back and Beal back. They're both there now. They've been there for a while, so Phoenix has been turning it on and playing better. So I like that. And then, as I said, I think Golden State's in a huge letdown spot. Even though Phoenix is good, and yeah, it's Kevin Durant, I don't know that you're going to get like a great effort out of Golden State after pulling off such a ridiculous win. Meanwhile, Phoenix is starting a road trip here, and not having to go that far to start this road trip, going just from Arizona up to the Bay Area. Not horrible, really. And they just lost to Minnesota at home. So I think, again, when you lose at home like that, Minnesota got their, or Phoenix actually failed to get their playoff revenge still. So Phoenix has not been good against Minnesota, man. Minnesota has just owned Phoenix. Minnesota owned them in the playoff series last year. Phoenix, I think, is 0-2 against Minnesota this year. So take from that what you will, but Phoenix just doesn't play well against Minnesota. But now, after that game, getting to go out on the road and you're still facing Golden State, and you don't have bigger games up next. You got Portland up next. So I do think Phoenix is going to pay attention to Golden State, and they did just lose the last time I played at Golden State, like I said. It is still Steph Curry there. So I do expect Phoenix is going to be focused here. You're starting a road trip. You want to get the road trip off on the right foot. You don't have a bigger game up next, so it is a focus spot, especially when you, either way, if you're leaving home with the momentum or if you're leaving home off kind of an ugly loss, just getting away from that, you tend to leave distractions behind at home and you get to focus more on basketball. So even though the line doesn't look like it's giving you that much value at this point with it having moved to this degree, it's still in the pick the winner situation. I don't like how we see the cash coming in on the Warriors here, but I'm fading the Warriors after they beat Oklahoma City, man. That's what it comes down to. I think you got a letdown spot there. Give me the Suns, and that's going to do it, man. Let's bounce back from an ugly losing day 2 days ago was terrible. Last night wasn't that bad, but let's bounce back, baby. We got 3 plays, 1 in each sport. Dayton in college basketball -1. Utah Hockey Club, please help me with this one. A split bet -1.5 puck line at +140, and the other half on -178 money line. And Phoenix Suns -1. That's going to do it. Happy Friday, everybody. Thanks for hanging out. Tower Gang Tone on Twitter. Patreon.com/Tower Gang for the bonus content for the most offensive podcast out there. You'll love it, baby. Go check it out. I got to get the most recent episode, get the description up, get it done, get it uploaded to the Patreon. I'll do that within the next 1 or 2 days or so. Let's do it. And that's going to do it for me for now, man. And we got tons and tons of college basketball. I don't know what I'm going to do about tomorrow. I know I've been doing the college basketball Saturday breakdowns on Saturday morning. I might still do that because Friday night, I just man, I don't want to necessarily do it. I know I did it with football, but man, it's just taking a lot out of me. So I don't know. We'll see about that. And I don't know if I want to discuss bracketology at all because I do start releasing bracketologies. I just kind of throw a link to a spreadsheet up there. So I do bracketology. So I am going to have that going as well. I've only released one iteration of it so far a few weeks ago, but now we're getting down to it, man. I love March Madness, so I may be doing that as well. I don't know that I'm going to be doing bracketology episodes of Better Off Dead, though, but I may at least be releasing the spreadsheet for it. All right, that's going to do it. Thanks, guys. Let's have a good Friday. Let's get some wins, and peace.